Sex. It surrounds you, yet remains one of the most taboo subjects in society. You've been taught rules about it. What's acceptable, what's shameful, what should never be spoken about. But what if I told you that sexuality is more than just pleasure or reproduction? What if it is the hidden force driving your thoughts, desires, and even your fears? Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, believed that your sexual energy shapes everything in your life, from your relationships to your ambitions, from your childhood experiences to the very foundation of society. And whether you acknowledge it or not, your sexuality is influencing you in ways you don't even realize. So are you ready to uncover what has been hidden? Freud's greatest contribution to psychology was his theory of the unconscious mind. His most powerful but shocking insight was that you are not as rational as you think you are. He believed that much of what you do, feel, and think is not actually controlled by your conscious mind, but by your unconscious desires, especially your sexual instincts. He wrote, "The conscious mind may be compared to a fountain playing in the sun and falling back into the great subterranean pool of subconscious from which it rises." What does this mean for you? It means that your deepest urges don't disappear when you ignore them. They sink into your unconscious and continue to influence you in ways you may not notice. Why are you drawn to certain people? Why do you struggle with certain emotions? Why do you repeat the same relationship patterns over and over? Freud would tell you, look to your unconscious. Your sexuality may be shaping more of your life than you realize. Think about how society talks about sexuality. From childhood, you've been taught what is right and wrong to feel, express, or even think. But here's the problem. Repressing your desires doesn't make them go away. It only drives them deeper into your unconscious. Freud warned, the repressed is only cut off from the conscious. It remains fully capable of activity, and from the moment it meets with a possibility of discharge, it breaks through into consciousness. In other words, what you repress will always return, but in disguise. Have you ever felt overwhelming guilt or shame about something, even though you didn't know why? Have you ever found yourself obsessing over the very thing you claim to reject? Have you ever judged others harshly, only to later realize you were projecting your own hidden desires? These are signs of the return of the repressed, a concept Freud introduced to explain how suppressed sexual energy finds other ways to surface. Your desires don't disappear. They shape your personality, your anxieties, and even your mental health. So, what are you repressing? And how might it already be controlling you? Whether you realize it or not, your sexuality began shaping you long before adulthood. One of Freud's most controversial ideas was that sexuality is present from birth. Before Freud, people believed that children had no sexual desires. But Freud argued that sexuality develops in stages, and if these stages are disrupted, they can lead to psychological problems later in life. He identified 5 stages of psychosexual development. 1. The oral stage during the first year of life. Pleasure is focused on the mouth, sucking, biting. 2. The anal stage from 1 to 3 years. Pleasure comes from control, toilet training, discipline. 3. The phallic stage from 3 to 6 years. Children become aware of their genitals and experience their first feelings of attraction. 4. The latency stage, from 6 to 12 years. Sexual desires are suppressed as children focus on learning and social skills. 5. The genital stage, after 12 years. Sexuality becomes fully mature and focused on relationships. Freud believed that if a person gets stuck at any stage, it can affect their personality for life. Someone fixated at the oral stage may develop habits like smoking or overeating. Someone stuck in the anal stage may become overly controlling or rigid. Someone with unresolved issues from the phallic stage may struggle with relationships and intimacy. This is why Freud believed in his theory of psychosexual development that childhood experiences shape our sexuality and psychological health as adults. So, if you constantly seek validation, if you struggle with control, if intimacy makes you anxious, these patterns may have been set in motion years ago. So ask yourself, what did your childhood teach you about love, power, and desire? Because whether you realize it or not, those lessons are still shaping your life. One of Freud's most shocking ideas was the Oedipus complex, the idea that young boys unconsciously desire their mothers and see their fathers as rivals. He based this theory on the Greek myth of Oedipus, who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. Freud believed that every child experiences a period where they are psychologically attached to the parent of the opposite sex and feel jealousy or competition toward the same-sex parent. For boys, this means unconsciously desiring the mother, fearing the father as a rival. For girls, Freud proposed a similar concept called the Electra complex, where they desire their father and compete with their mother. These unconscious desires are not literal, they are symbolic of the deep emotions and attachments that form during childhood. If unresolved, they can lead to difficulties in adult relationships, intimacy, and emotional security. Freud believed that successful development required resolving these unconscious conflicts and learning to form healthy relationships outside of the family. Have you ever wondered why you're attracted to certain people? Freud believed that your attractions are not random. They are reflections of your unconscious mind, shaped by childhood attachments, suppressed desires, and unresolved conflicts. As we discussed about his idea of the Oedipus complex, suggesting that as a child you formed deep psychological attachments to your parents. If you had a distant or unavailable parent, you might find yourself drawn to emotionally distant partners. If you had a controlling or dominant parent, you might be attracted to partners who reflect that dynamic. If you grew up craving love and attention, you may still seek it through relationships in ways you don't even realize. Freud would tell you, your relationships are mirrors of your unconscious mind. So the next time you feel drawn to someone, ask yourself, what does this attraction reveal about me? Because your desires are not just about the other person, they are about your own psychology. Freud believed that society is built on the repression of sexuality. In his book, Civilization and Its Discontents, he argued that humans have instinctual drives for pleasure, for power, for intimacy, but society forces you to suppress them in order to maintain order. A civilization that leaves so large a number of its participants unsatisfied and drives them into revolt neither has nor deserves the prospect of a lasting existence. Think about this. Society tells you who you should desire. It tells you how much sexuality is acceptable. It creates guilt, shame, and fear around natural instincts. But when you suppress human nature too much, Freud warned, it leads to frustration, aggression, and even the collapse of civilizations. So, how much of what you believe about sexuality is truly yours, and how much has been imposed on you by culture, religion, and tradition? Because the more aware you become, the more freedom you have to choose your own path. Freud believed that the key to mental health is making the unconscious conscious. Instead of running from your desires, he encouraged you to explore and understand them. Here's how you can start. First, pay attention to your reactions. The things that trigger you most often reflect something about yourself. If you judge someone's sexuality harshly, ask, am I rejecting something within me? If you feel guilt or shame about desire, ask, where did I learn this? Is it really mine? Second, examine your attraction patterns. Your relationships are not random. They are reflections of your unconscious mind. Look at past relationships. Do you see any patterns? Are you attracted to people who bring out the same emotional experiences you had in childhood? Recognizing these patterns can help you break free from unhealthy cycles. Third, accept that sexuality is a part of being human. Freud warned that denying your sexuality leads to suffering. Instead of rejecting it, learn to integrate it into your self-awareness. Sexuality is not something to be feared. It is a source of creativity, connection, and self-understanding. As Freud said, the sexual life of adult women is a dark continent for psychology. But this is true for all of us. Sexuality remains one of the greatest mysteries of the human mind. Freud believed that your desires, your relationships, and even your anxieties are shaped by your sexuality in ways you don't fully understand. And the more you repress, the more power these unconscious forces have over you. So I ask you, are you in control of your sexuality, or is it controlling you? What have you been taught to repress, and what might happen if you explored it instead? Are you ready to uncover the unconscious forces that shape your life? Because once you do, you might finally understand yourself. Love what you're hearing, then show some love. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more powerful insights. Let's grow together.